Welcome everybody. I am really excited to have one of my favorite events here. Everybody on this call worked hard to meet together. We are coming from 4 different cities. It was kind of crazy. We have 3 time zones, right, on this call to get together, have the leaders of 2 groups, Dr. Beverly Scott and Ruby Vigo, talking about their organizations, having their youth cohorts talk on infrastructure. So this is the youth leaders panel on infrastructure, where we want to hear their opinions. More importantly, we want professionals, city planners, designers, engineers to hear their thoughts so that we can incorporate this into our day-to-day work. So without further ado.
Hi everyone, Robert, thanks for having us here today. My name is Ruby. I'm the Duwamish Valley Youth Corps coordinator. Duwamish Valley Youth Corps is a group that works with youth from the Duwamish Valley, usually Georgetown South Part. And we do a lot of work. Some of the work that we do with newer youth is we give them a general class on Thursdays to teach them about the history of their community. And then Saturdays we do some restorative work. And then there's other groups that are within the Duwamish Valley, and that's the Youth Advisory Council, which is the group that I brought today, and I'm excited to have them share. Yeah.
And Dr. Scott, let's give an intro for IYAI Plus, introducing youth to American infrastructure. You are all over the place too. You're coming from the Bay Area at the moment, correct?
Right, I'm in the Bay Area, and I just want to say a shout out to you, Robert, and also to Ruby. It's really a pleasure. Yes, I'm in the Bay Area, but our program is a national. Well, actually, we're doing some work that's international too. But it's really all about introducing youth to the infrastructure sectors. There's 16 public infrastructure sectors. We do a lot of focus on the lifeline sectors, which are water, transport, energy, communications, and we also a lot in terms of advanced manufacturing. All of the areas are absolutely critical to overall quality of life. And every single one of the areas also have major workforce challenges. And the other is we have a particular focus on underrepresented youth and communities in these sectors, which has been acknowledged across the board. And across the board, that is youth of color and women regardless, okay? And every single one of the sectors of the lifeline sectors have well documented that they've had persistent issues in those areas. And so for us, it's all about people, communities, and outcomes. We want to encourage and inspire young people to be involved in the careers. And what we found is that many of them, just because you have a STEM or a STEAM program, does not make a connection to the actual careers and the magic that people have the opportunity to bring when they're involved in the careers. We also want to encourage young people, whether they go into a career or not, to have an interest in infrastructure for their lives, because we focus on the community building aspect of infrastructure. And so for us, that development of their own civic muscle and participation and involvement is very important. And really the transformative justice parts of infrastructure. So we say infrastructure is oftentimes hidden in plain sight. And so our young people get out in their communities, they actually look at their infrastructure, they tell their own stories and history and learned experience, and we respect that learned experience that they bring to the table. So they'll talk about it themselves, but as we have been going through this horrific period with the pandemic, part of their looking at it, they said, look, Doc, we got 3 things we want to say. Number one, that we should be looking this as North Star, guiding light, making time for us as a nation, and that we should all be about the business of trying to define what is a just normal, not just, oh, we're going back to the unequal normal, but what is a just normal. The second part of that is that young people who are our future should be an absolute meaningful part of the definition of where we go with this infrastructure. And then a part on reimagining a youth inspired, particularly as we're getting ready to make some of the biggest investments that we have probably ever made as a country in infrastructure, that those investments should in fact be informed and inspired by youth. Okay, so that's that's our story. We're sticking to it. And I'm very thrilled this morning to be joined by three of our alums who are from Chicago and the District of Columbia.
Let's start. Michelle, you want to kick it off, do intros?
Yeah, sure. I'm Michelle Velasco. I'm a junior right now at GSL. I live in South Park and I'm trying to help my community out.
Faith and Jay?
Hi everyone, my name is Faith Villalobos. I'm currently a high school senior at Highline Big Picture High School. I'm interested in environmental studies and as well as the healthcare. I've been with the Duwamish Valley Youth Corps about 2.5 years doing a lot of projects, and I'm excited to be here.
All right, yeah, hi, my name is Jake Bookwalter. I am a sophomore in high school and I live in the Georgetown neighborhood of Seattle. I've been involved with the RCC for almost a year now, on and off. I'm really excited to be here.
And is there, I know you guys have been really busy with a lot of events recently. A recent project that you guys have worked on that's been, exciting. I know it's springtime. There's a lot going on in the community.
Yeah, personally, one of my favorites was a mosque study we did. And through the mosque study we collected different mosques in the Duwamish Valley, and then they got sent off, I think, to the east side of the US. And there's some scientists, they process it through and everything, and just collecting the moss for me was exciting, and we got to be like some youth scientists, so I really like that. It has to be one of my favorite projects.
The Mosque Study is also coming back this spring, so keep an eye out for that one.
And this is moths, as in like flying moths.
Yeah, so moss collects a lot of metal concentrations, so through that we got to see like how polluted the air was, so I really like that project.
Very interesting. Something that I don't think most of us would ever think about is testing for heavy metals in the air using moths. Very cool stuff. I'll flip it over back to IYAI Plus cohort. Jaylin, you want to kick it off? You're coming from Chicago, yes?
Yes, I'm coming from the east side of Chicago. My name is Jaylin Holmes. I'm currently a rising sophomore at Howard University, which is in DC. And I'm a civil engineering major. The disciplines that I really want to go to is structural engineering and transportation. I met IYAI last summer with the Chicago Transit Authority, which is the second largest transportation authority in the United States, and had a really good program with IYAI. Shout out to Dr. Bev and the staff, and I can't wait to get it started. Definitely.
And you were part of the transition, right? The rapid, tumultuous transition to the virtual programs, correct?
Yes.
So a big applause. I know that was a massive undertaking. I'm glad you guys were able to do your program, even though it wasn't in person.
Right, absolutely.
Aquino, you want to go ahead?
Sure, sir. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Aquino Gordon. I'm a senior at Cardozo High School. I'm in a trash STEM program. This fall I'll be enrolling at George Mason, and I'll be majoring in civil engineering as well as Jaylin. I'm not sure what sector of infrastructure I'll be joining, but I say infrastructure. What sector of civil engineering I'll be joining in this year, but the time will be civil.
And Cardozo, Washington, D.C. Geographically, where does that fall?
That's in DC.
DC. Nice. And it's okay if you don't know. I went into chemical engineering and I graduated and went into corrosion, which has nothing to do with chemicals. So, hey, you go, you learn, and you figure it out from there. Antonio, you're also coming from Washington, D.C., yes?
Yes. My name is Antonio. Coming from Washington, D.C., I go to Cardozo. I'm a senior, and I came from TransStem also, like Okeino, and we were working with IYAI. I started when I was in like my 10th grade, like in the summertime of 10th grade, and that's when I just came back like for this now, just try to better myself and get more exposure to what's going on with infrastructure and other like jobs and careers.
And it sounds like we're going to be seeing your touch on some of the infrastructure working with art and adding some vibrancy to our city, which is much needed, right?
Mhm.
Nice. And what, you said you got started in 10th grade. What kept you going back? What was the big interest? I know Dr. Scott and her energy is definitely addictive and something that keeps you coming back, but anything in particular?
For me, the main thing that kept me coming back, that made me come back, was like me being able to learn something that I never thought I would learn before. Like what we did with the Amtraks, the DC water and all that. Like I didn't really know how important it was until we had the program, the IYAI program.
So everybody on the call, raise your hand if learning something new has kept you engaged with the Youth Corps. So human curiosity is a very powerful thing. Again, I appreciate everybody being on this call. I'm excited to get our questions. I want to do an acknowledgement, a land acknowledgement. I try to do things differently each day here. Let's just take a look at what has changed. Again, myself and Duwamish Valley Youth Corps, we're coming from South Park, right? We're just south of Seattle, next to Georgetown, again, where the Youth Corps is involved. And you can see, I mean, look on the left, the 1800s. I mean, this is a beautiful accumulation of rivers and tidal lands. I mean, a very unique geological feature in terms of the entire world. Not many places have the rapid change of tides, the degree that tides come in and outflow. I mean, it makes this area extremely unique. If we look at it, 150 years later, 171 years later, what's happened? We've covered it up, we've flattened it. The tides still come in and out, but it's channelized. And now we're working as hard as we can to fix these issues, to bring the salmon back. A huge study just came out that we talked about earlier in infrastructure week about the compound in tires, that it could kill juvenile salmon in a matter of hours. So how much impact we have had in those 171 years of bringing, we'll say white infrastructure into this area, it's quite severe and drastic. So moving forward, right, we want to have those fresh thoughts. We want to embody this history, and we need to acknowledge the amount of change we've done to this landscape and countless others. So getting right into it, talking about this idea, reshaping infrastructure legacy, right? The idea that infrastructure we build today will affect future generations to come. So our first prompt for our youth panel here is, let's enter a time machine, right? And let's think about something, that previous generations of engineers, planners, designers, our infrastructure professionals of past could have done differently. And how might our present cities be changed? How might they look differently? I'll open it up if anybody wants to start.
I guess I'll go first. But we all know there's always room for improvement. So I feel like in the future, everything is going to get better. Buildings are going to get better. The water system is going to advance. Who knows? Might be flying cars, so it won't be as much roads anymore. So I feel like everything is going to improve as time goes on.
I love the dose of optimism, and I do agree. I think there's a lot of people working to make things better. Here in South Park, I mean, what Faith, I see, is there something here in our neighborhood that we could have done a little different?
I feel like having more eco-friendly buildings to help like the air pollution, as well as I know the Duwamish River, not throwing paint in there, making sure that it wasn't fun size, so we could have had a nice river to swim in the summers and stuff like that. That would have been nice.
Jaylin, anything in Chicago?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm pretty sure this is not just in Chicago. A lot of our minority communities are near some of these, plants, factories, and facilities that, emit toxic pollution into the air. And these are the same communities where our children have to grow up. If we think of playgrounds, if we think of schools and stuff like that. As being an engineer, those are kind of projects that I want to go into. And I think, being a part of the youth is really important, that we, think about the future. We are the future, and yet the future is not here, but we have to plan out what are we going to do to make sure our youth have the best, as they grow up and develop over the years. So one of my biggest things that I feel like that, our infrastructure engineers and city planners should have done is acknowledge the communities and stuff that they're putting these, buildings and facilities in, because the air that we breathe is not the same air that, people on the north side breathe. We're so surrounded by these places where we breathe in this toxic stuff, and we now over time we have, developed respiratory diseases and in our communities. So, having, realizing what we have done over time and who is really affected.
There's no excuse. We know that factories were intentionally placed in BIPOC low-income communities, and they might not even been given the opportunity to help build them or give employment in that process. Okay, we'll move on to the next one. Last year did give us a pause. We saw some of the most powerful social movements, of the last several decades. It brought these issues to the mainstream. If there was a success in COVID, it was the effects of BLM, the effects of environmental justice almost becoming a household name, almost. There's still some people that don't know what it is, and that's fair, but it's come to light. And this idea of reimagining normal, which would be a just normal, and a nation free of extractive or exploitative systems. What do y'all think is, the most critical to achieve environmental justice in your community? And how do you see this green economy flourishing? And, what can we do as professionals to help fulfill those goals?
Let's see, I think that's something that's, I don't know if I'd say it's most critical, but that's super important in achieving environmental justice, is engaging with the communities that are going to be affected by whatever infrastructure you're building or whatever's being planned there. And like working with those communities, like if, for example, your infrastructure and your industry polluted a neighborhood like Georgetown and South Park for decades, working with those community members to figure out what they want, how they want it to be cleaned up, instead of just deciding how it's going to be cleaned up and doing it without any community input. And I think that's one of the most important things.
Yeah, like what Jake said, just cleaning up our community, lessen the pollution, making communities more livable, the air more breathable.
And to add on, I believe, like the first step would be, going into the communities and asking what do you need help with, or what can we do to support you? What do we need in the community? What is harming the community? Those different things is really big. And I feel like, going off, the topic of environmental justice, we have communities that still to this day haven't, been provided the care and support that they need. If we think of, Katrina and what it did to New Orleans, there's still communities out there who don't, whose homes are still damaged or destroyed from natural disasters like a hurricane. And, the biggest question, to start off with, what do we do when things like that happen? We have nowadays, climate change is getting really serious. If you didn't know, if you don't know already, there's a lot of communities out there who don't get that support that they really need. And the frustrating part is that as being a part of the youth, if we continue to let these things happen, we won't have a future. We won't have homes. We won't have these different things because, our voice is not heard. Our voice is not heard. We don't get a chance. We don't sit down at meetings, community meetings. We don't go to the board and things like that. We're just in this place that we know is home, but at the same time, we don't know, we're not educated, we're not taught the different things that's really, taking our future away. So, that's what I'm big on right now.
So I guess I would like to ask the question, maybe a little bit of pushback. We know more, but knowing more and doing better. I'd love to say that even with the unrest that took place, that it's the will to act, okay, and kind of pull it all together. So that's why the infrastructure discussion is important, but also connecting that up with what do we really need to do in the systems of decision making, okay, that will make that happen, that will help to make that happen. And that's why the participation and involvement of young people in the democratic process, in going to the meetings, in voting, okay. I mean, I think just about everybody or most everybody on this phone is 18 years old. I mean, that actually taking those next steps and understanding how those pieces are connected is very, very important.
We're asking a lot of the youth. You know, we're saying, hey, the youth's going to solve this problem. We need to get them more involved. But you guys have your own things going on. You have school, you have family life, you have aspirations, let alone not, you know, you're part of the youth. I mean, you have your things outside of all these. And I feel like it's a big burden to be placed to look up and see, yeah, man, we got to do something about climate change. We got to do something about EJ and infrastructure. And so again, it's like, what can we as professionals do to alleviate that burden, to come to you? And, you know, again, a big thing is, you know, paying for time, but any ideas on what we could do as professionals to make sure your voice is heard without, you know, burdening your life and your lifestyle?
I feel like not having to say the same thing 10 times to be listened to is really important. Like just having to say it once and being listened to then.
Yeah, because there's not a lot of people out here that actually value the voice of the youth, that actually listen to what we say and act upon it. Some people just listen and then they might just blow it over, just continue on with the day, but not a lot of people value what we actually say.
That's a great point. And then also what Jake said, and you get that a lot from community residents, okay? When people are experiencing challenges, poverty, all of that, it's not just one thing. It's not just housing. It's not just transit. It's not just the sewer. It's not just the clean water. And once again, they could wind up being challenged because everybody's so siloed. I'm the housing group and I came out and here I got meetings. I'm the transport group. Now I got a bunch of community meetings. I'm the sanitation group. I've got to, and I think what the professionals the folks who are, and when I say professionals, I respect very much the learned experience of youth, okay? And that's one of the things that we say at IYAI, it's an exchange because every single person that walks in our door has been living in this infrastructure. They have grown up in it. And so they bring more experience, to tell you the truth, than many of the people who call themselves the professionals, okay? But the point of it being is that on our side of the fence, we can do a better job of trying to be more holistic, try to coordinate things, go to people's meetings instead of having them to have to come to our meeting. Everybody got 10 meetings going on in the same community at the same time, want the same people to come out. And then, you know, and so I'm just saying there are things that you know, that the quote, the folks who are sitting at the tables now can clearly do to make it easier for everybody in a community to wind up being able to participate.
This idea of a green economy scares a lot of people because it does change traditional industry. I mean, do you have any thoughts on, you know, roles or ways that we could make a green economy flourish, you know, non-traditional workforce, non-traditional employment?
I think, like, there's something with the youth. The youth have a lot of ideas just that aren't as traditional or what are considered traditional. And just listening to their ideas, hearing them talk, because they'll probably bring up a point or some other action that you can use that probably benefit like their future, because they're the ones that are going to be here when this is actually going to affect people. they're gonna still be here. They might have children. They tell you to be here. And people want what's best for them. So just having their voices be heard because they know what's best for the future. And let me just vouch that real quick because like Michelle, I'm always learning something from Michelle, like super random facts. I'm like, how did you know this? So definitely we can always learn from these.
I had something to say about earlier when they were talking about when people don't listen. Well, I feel like everybody can listen, but it's more of understanding and comprehension of what we're saying to them, other than just listening to what we're saying. If you don't understand what we're saying, there's no point in talking about it.
So keeping along the lines, the themes of infrastructure, right? Rethinking the next generation of infrastructure, where things are a bit more connected. Our communities are growing alongside the infrastructure. Our water is flowing alongside electricity being produced. Buildings are being built alongside green spaces growing. This idea of symbiosis. So how can any new projects, the idea of don't build it for the sake of building, build the right project. What types of new projects would you like to see in your communities? And really with this mega infrastructure bill looming, how do you hope it can help and impact your families in a positive way rather than what we've seen in the decades of history?
I wouldn't say new infrastructure, but I just would say improved infrastructure. Like in my communities, the roads are horrible. The water system is horrible. Whenever it rains, the streets get flooded, the parks get flooded. So I think just improving infrastructure could start, have a great impact.
I agree. And I also think better connections are important too. Like, I think it would better serve our community to have like everything around us, so we don't have to drive to a different neighborhood to get groceries or drive to a different neighborhood to go to school. Having everything we need here, and if we do have to go to a different neighborhood or a different area, being able to get there on public transit or by foot or on your bike, just having to use your car to get everywhere. I think that's really important. Just better connectivity.
Yeah, adding on to what Jade said, I think public transportation is something really big. Right now in South Park, there's a lot of cars going and coming, and it's not, the air pollution has gotten much worse since that started. And so public transportation would help a lot more. And like how they said, having everything already in our community, not having to go that far, or like to get something, like to get food or to like go to school and stuff like that. And I just want to add to the pollution, the air pollution is we live by Boeing and an airport. So we have a whole bunch of airplanes that fly by too and just add on to the pollution.
And then I guess you've also got the noise factor too. Mhm.
Definitely.
Yeah, like what Jake said, accessibility. I get it. It's like a Walmart 5 minutes away from me, but it hurts having a school 30 minutes away from me, and like church being like a good 15 minutes. So accessibility could really be improved.
Yeah, you'll hear this idea of a 15-minute city. There's been a lot of discussion on that because who lives in the 15-minute city? Refocusing on a 15-minute community, right? Where we may not have the whole city layout, but we have a 15-minute walkable radius within our community to get those groceries, to do some local shopping, to get to your school, your place of worship, and a green space. Seattle Parks and Recs prides themselves on, I think it's 97% of the population lives within a 10-minute walk to a park. Now, some parks are bigger than others, but bringing that mentality, I think, is huge. What do you see being, like the biggest void in having that 15-minute walkability? Whether that's school, worship, green space, being, existing in a food desert. What would you say is, the most pressing issue?
Food deserts. definitely. I think having access to food wherever you live is super important.
And I guess the other thing would be to fresh, affordable food, because that's one of the challenges that people have too. They'll have something, but nowhere near, either the cost is very, very high, or just not the kind of quality product that you want to have.
Affordable and healthy too, definitely.
Mhm.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And then like a big one, talk about food deserts and having access to that healthy food and different like that, and also being affordable. We do have to think about like what is that? How does that affect us? If you think of like obesity and how we have high obesity rates in minority communities. Why is that? It's because it's a McDonald's down the street, but there's no Whole Foods where we can have those vegetables and different things like that that we need. And two, can we afford it? Is this affordable? If I live in public housing, how much my rent is. You think I could afford vegetables and stuff that's like $5 a a pound or something like that. So also acknowledging like how is that really putting an effect on us, and then will we be able to live? Do we have to eat this for the rest of our life? It's the big question.
Yeah, that is definitely true, because it's easy to go to McDonald's to get two sandwiches for $5, but if you go to Walmart or the Whole Foods, you have a head of lettuce for $5. So it just keeps us in the circle, in the cycle.
I know that in Japan, everything's a little bit more closer together, like grocery stores, schools, and like homes are much closer, which most usually students will either take their bike or walk to school, which would take like a 10-15 minute walk instead of like here where we have to like either drive or take the bus, and sometimes have to take multiple buses, and it takes a while to get there. And just look at other people's like all other countries' culture and looking how they do it, and maybe like adding it to how we do it, or like finding a way where we can like put them together.
What about things like urban and community gardens?
I actually wanted to go back to what Michelle said about learning from different cultures and countries, about like adapting and like thinking green and just having like those green spaces. My family are from Costa Rica, so when I went to Costa Rica, the mall over there, it was amazing. Like when I came back to the mall here, I was like, this mall is so boring and dry, like different. But there was a lot of green spaces on the rooftop in the mall. It had like a lot of greenery where you could walk on the rooftop. It was just really nice, and they had solar panels on top and everything, and that just stuck with me. So like learning from other countries and just kind of being innovative with the malls and like the youth centers and stuff like that, I think would really help also like for the youth to think green and just kind of for that to change.
Actually, talking about green spaces, here in South Park, in the industry, like the industry area, there's like a whole like huge wall of plants. It's just completely covered in plants. Me and Ruby pass it, and it's like so pretty. It's so nice. It's like it looks nice, and it helps being over here. Like being over here cleans up the air and helps filter things out.
There is a mental wellness benefit to having plants in your life, whether that's in your diet or underneath your feet or in front of your eyes.
Do you think it would be helpful if we've been talking, I mean, how do you get this to happen if maybe there was a requirement for there to be infrastructure type in schools from like K through 12, like to really wind up not overdoing it, but some of this whole conversation that we've had here that are just like how people connect the dots, how is the is to literally have kind of like a 101 that you have that would be elementary school, middle school, and high school level, that would kind of be like this kind of just overall awareness of infrastructure, what you can do, how you can do it, how the pieces come together, so that rather than everybody keep having to make something up, okay, we could come together, since infrastructure is so critical in this country, and actually try to do something like that, which would at least be an introduction. Don't even have to make it mandatory, okay? But you know, we've been thinking that that could be something that could be very, very helpful.
What is one thing, and I'm going to go around the table, everybody's got to give me their answer. What is one thing you would like to see come out of this infrastructure bill? Let's start with Jaylin.
I was hoping he was going different directions, because it's like so many different things that I could be talking for hours. If I had to choose one, man. If I had to choose one, and just thinking of the youth, I would say green spaces in the education environment. So that's schools and everything like that, because we kind of live our lives in like a box. If you think of your house, that's a box. Then you go to school, it's another box. We don't have like just like plants and everything like that that's in our just in our area and stuff like that. So I think green spaces like at schools and around playgrounds is really great, because we build all these buildings, but what did you take away to build that building? You took away the trees that was there and all those different things that we need. Like, for example, in your room office, you have plants behind you. And I believe that's great, because you have that clean energy in the room. So I think just letting our children be able to have those natural things in the environment is great.
I would agree with Jaylin. Definitely green youth spaces would help with like mental health, the environment, physically, just a lot of benefits, I think. So just thinking like that, and I think that would really help.
With what Jaylin had said, I think having green spaces in places that you wouldn't necessarily think there would be, like let's say like factories or like work environments, like office buildings, where you really think it's just a you could add like a green wall or like something on the roof to add like how they said about the mall, like add some like plants or something on the roof to like help, because how you, like Robert said, you took away the plants and the trees that were there, might as well put something back.
I will touch back on what Dr. Scott said, educating youth of what infrastructure is. I feel like the younger they know what it is, I feel like they can really bring a change to the community, because if you educate the youth, they're gonna educate their parents, and it's gonna be a cycle. They're gonna grow up, they're gonna want to know more about infrastructure. Because that's exactly how I turned out. At first I had no idea what infrastructure was. And now I've been working with that stuff for 3 years. And I'm decided to want to join the water sector, transportation sector. Like, there's just so many options out there. And I feel like the youth will feel the same way.
I think in another direction, I think it would be incredible if a mega infrastructure investment for my family, if it could help just move our cities and even the whole country away from having to use cars. So like building up public transportation and pedestrian access and stuff like that to a point where having to use a car it's just not worth it anymore, because something like a bus or a subway or light rail or whatever you call it in your area is just so much faster and more reliable than cars could ever be. I think that would be really important for moving our society forward.
Jake, that's so important. Yeah, because I always say I love public transit, but as well, people are pedestrians first, okay? And so the walkability is really, really key, connected with everything else. So that's a great one, yeah.
And would you put, additional bike ability in that category?
Oh yeah, of course. biking and pedestrian access are super important. And even if you look at in Seattle, what areas already have bike access and what areas don't, and compare that to the wealth of those communities and who lives in those communities. And there's a lot of disparities currently in Seattle, who has access to biking and better pedestrian infrastructure.
Well, see, that's where those issues of connecting the equity, because that's where issues of the unbanked come in, okay? And unbanking is not just about poverty. There's some people who choose less, but a lot of the big pieces of how people were initially putting in biking infrastructure, where you had to have credit cards and all that kind of stuff like that. And if you really didn't have that, then those are things that institutionalize disparity. Okay, good idea, but how do we make sure that it's accessible and affordable to everybody?
I feel like something that could help out the community would be more like recreation centers to give the kids something to do. Because without recreation centers, that's when you got like the kids that, at least from where I know, they probably be outside doing something they supposed to be doing, like stealing, probably shooting dice or doing something like that. When they can have a recreation center and playing basketball, doing games, learning like more sports and keep them active and out of trouble.
Working with the communities is really important, and like asking yourself what groups and like what systems already exist in these communities that I'm coming into, and how can I work with them to come up with a solution that works for them or works with them, not for them.
Yeah. Good point. You know, as we say, we should be planning with communities, not for communities. Excellent.
I feel like there's a lot of potential in the youth. And just specifically in general, there is time for a change. And I feel like us as a community, as people that are in infrastructure, I feel like we can get let down. That's listening.
Another thing I want to see is clean water. Water is another topic that I feel like don't get talked about. Do these communities have access to something that's natural, like water? And it's not just here in the United States. There's other places too that need access to things like water. If you think of Africa and over there, are they able to bathe? Could you imagine not being able to take a shower or not being able to drink clean water? And if we think of humans, we are mostly made of water. So if we don't have water, what does that tell us? So I think figuring out those places that don't have the access to things like that, those natural things like that, is really important as well.
And I really like what you said about we're all living in boxes, whether it's the box we get into to go show up at our box that pays us, the box that we sleep in, and along the lines of green spaces and bringing in a different cultural perspective. You go south of the border to any country in Central America, any city in Central America, they have a plaza that's usually quite beautiful, full of flowers, and full of people. And that is not a box. It's anything but a box. It's a place where people can have these types of conversations, where if you had a bad day, you could get it off your shoulder to a complete stranger. I know that's not something that I've had in my communities here in the United States. It may be something we could work towards, adding those water features, adding the green spaces, removing that box that's been placed upon us. Well, that brings us to the end. I want to personally thank every one of you. I really enjoyed this. I look forward to keeping in contact, working with you guys in the future, bringing our cities together. We are one nation. And again, this is for United for Infrastructure, leading with infrastructure through commonality, through collaboration, bringing these ideas together. And, like I said, from here, we take this conversation to the planning room, to the design board, to the next time we have a project on the books that, first step, community engagement. Just to kind of summarize some of the points, infrastructure hindsight, right? Let's look back on the mistakes. And anything we do, let's make sure we correct them. We as professionals, we have to advocate for the youth. Anytime we've had these conversations, when we've heard your voices, we need to be the ones that repeat it, because y'all got your life to live. You have your things that you are doing, and we need to make sure that we shape infrastructure that when you're in our position, hopefully we don't have to be asking those same questions. I really liked that idea of ownership of, legacy pollution and those contributors righting their wrongs. Knowing what we know now, there's no excuse. And again, with this big infrastructure bill, green space, water, access to water, clean water, education programs, investing in our youth. I love the idea of bringing infrastructure, a curriculum to the high school for just that awareness, improving public transportation and reducing the reliance on individual vehicles. This is a great point, Jake. And finally, Antonio, this idea of adding recreational outlets, investing in that, making sure that within, a 5 to 15-minute walk, we have a place where people can meet, whether that's a plaza or a court or a field, and be free and outside of their box. I'm going to use that, Jaylin. I love it. And Utility Squared Infrastructure Week, we always highlight work with our community. Community is first. We build infrastructure for our community, and our community uses that infrastructure. So again, I thank everybody. And this concludes Infrastructure Week, guys. I think we did a good conversation.
Thank you very much, Robert. And it was a pleasure meeting everybody. We'll stay in contact.
100% for sure. I appreciate hearing everyone's thoughts today, and I just look forward to hearing more from y'all.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Have a good one.